I think on just a kind of a primal level, I think there's just something about having superpowered characters team up with other superpowered characters is just very appealing.
All right.
Each one of them are true individuals, and they all have their own sense of right and wrong. While they might not share exact same beliefs, they do share a common good and a common goal.
So they then have to adapt and change and become bigger and better heroes to unite and work together.
And that's great drama, and that's great storytelling. It is what has allowed the Justice League to continue for the last 50 years.
There's a great history to explore in the Justice League. The team and these characters live in all these different media, comic books, animation, video games, toys. Every generation meet these characters and a different take on the Justice League. And now we're seeing the next generation meeting the Justice League through this film.
If you want to follow the history of the Justice League, it actually starts not even with the Justice League, it starts with the Justice Society. The Justice Society featured a lot of the characters that existed in the 1940s and brought them all together in one big story. It was more a club and an organization than a superhero team, and it was more about sharing adventures than actually going on adventures together. Then you flash forward to the late 50s, early 60s when the Silver Age of comics is starting. They're reintroducing these new interpretations of our characters. So it only seemed to follow suit that the next interpretation of the Justice Society is a new group, and this was called the Justice League. It was a smash hit.
Brave and the Bold number 28, Justice League number 1. Been around since 1960. What is that? Carry the One. Like a long time. They've been around a long, long time. They came together because there's a giant starfish called Starro. That was the big threat.
So you start to see Justice League now becoming an integral portion of the DC universe. So Justice League becomes the book where all characters seem to appear. So if there's one comic you're supposed to buy, that was the one. My personal favorites of those stories are the ones where they go out and try to convince new characters to join the team. The Atom joins later, Green Arrow joins later. They go out there and they search out characters like Zatanna. They offer the position to Metamorpho. He turns them down because he doesn't want to be a hero. And they keep on introducing new characters.
The thing that really did it for me was the run of stories that Len Wein wrote in the 70s, which were just really great adventures. What he would do, it wouldn't be an adventure would finish and then there'd be a new one. There would be a new one, but there was plot threads that ran through it, so it was very much like television today, where we have an individual episode, but there are massive plot threads that run through and play out, and mysteries that you have to think about and solve. So his Justice League for me was real inspiration.
And then they did Crisis on Infinite Earths, which is the most famous comic book storyline by George Perez and Mark Wolfman. Crisis came out in the mid-'80s.
All the DC heroes, Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Hawkman, Green Lantern, Flash, etc., 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 you can go on forever, were all created between 1938 and 1941. Almost 50 years later, the best characters have been continuing. Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman were published non-stop. Some of those characters are starting to get older. They don't feel as modern anymore. We needed something to make them special again. Also, DC was too confusing for new readers. He had a strange continuity. We had this multiverse of different planets filled with multiple versions of the superheroes. You didn't know who all the characters were. And my pitch was, let's start with getting rid of the multiverse. Let's bring it down to our basic characters. Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, one of each. Let's think about what works and what doesn't work, and how can we make it work now for 1985?
When A New Crisis came out, they relaunched a lot of titles, Superman and Wonder Woman and Flash, but also Justice League with Giffen DeMatteis and Kevin Maguire. It was not the usual team you saw, and the tone of it was funny. There was a lot of humor to it. It was this weird mix of characters, and from the outside, it was like, oh wow, they're trying to do something new. It was wonderful, and people really liked it. They were kind of going against the trend of grim and gritty comics. It was a great take on the team, and it was cool to see these strange characters together that we'd never seen come together and form the Justice League. And so for years and years and years, the Justice League was never the Big Seven, as they called them.
Then you flash forward to Midsummer's Nightmare, which is really a standalone, independent story. And that's the first time you see the Seven interacting again. And lo and behold, the reaction from the fan base is very strong. Then ultimately that gets you to the big launch point, which is JLA, when Grant Morrison takes hold of the book and really takes all the primary characters, puts them together, creates villains and situations that really are worthy of bringing those 7 characters together.
When I came into it, I said, can we bring back the Big Seven Justice League? Can we focus on giant-scale adventures that only they could deal with? The big idea I had though was the Justice League was so close to the Greek pantheon of gods. Let's make a point of that. Let's actually assign them. You know, the Flash is Hermes, Superman is Zeus, Batman is Hades. And it really fits beautifully because the DC characters are such big archetypes. What I could then do was go back to the Iliad or the Odyssey or to Celtic or Norse myths. And there was just such a great wealth of stuff that could be adapted or science fictionized or recreated. So I think that was what I brought to it, a sense of grandeur, a sense of scope, and the fact that these characters could reach out to every single corner of the DC universe and explore it in a new way.
If you go back to the earliest stories of the Justice League, there wasn't a lot of conflict between the characters. It wasn't until later that modern creators came in and decided if we bring more conflict between these characters, even though they're heroes, it makes for a more interesting story. It makes for a more interesting team because it more resembles real life.
We tried to position them as professionals, even though they would sometimes disagree or fall out. It was all about, let's get the job done. And I used to love the interplay of using all those powers together to defeat an enemy that seemed undefeatable. But if you combine those skills, if you're smart enough to get the recipe right, then the Justice League can pretty much solve any problem. And you do this, and you do that, and you do this, and we'll save the world.
That's probably my favorite run of all time. It was really a special time for Justice League.
The New 52 was a big publishing initiative we launched in 2011, where we basically looked at the entire DC universe and said, if we could start over, how do we do it? And so one of the first things that we could do was redefine the Justice League, what brought these characters together, and really show readers the first glimpses of the interactions of the world's greatest superheroes and do it in a realistic way where we showcase the differences between the personalities.
We went back to the team. It was Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, Flash, Aquaman, Green Lantern, and that's the first time we brought in Cyborg. That's the core team that we started with and kind of went back to the basics. Over the years, there's been a lot of changes, but it always comes back, no matter how many changes happen in the comic books, it always comes back to these are the original characters. My love for DC Comics, and specifically superheroes, because I'm all things DC, comes from Super Friends, which was this Saturday morning animated series.
Back then, all we really had was animation, so the Super Friends was the closest thing we had to seeing the Justice League come to life, because you could see them move, and they talked, and they interacted. And they had a theme song, and that's what made me go outside and put a towel around my neck and run around like a dork.
It was done under really restrictive TV broadcast standards and practices. They were not allowed to show characters punching other characters. So any kind of action they had, it was more like Superman would fight a tornado rather than fight another villain. There was things like that which kind of kept it from its full potential. When we came along and did our Justice League show in the early 2000s, it gave you a chance to take something that was like a static image on a comic and bring it into cinematic kind of storytelling. After we had done 2 seasons of Justice League, Cartoon Network said, yeah, we would like you guys to do another season, but we want to rebrand the show somehow. I came up with this name, Justice League Unlimited. And I thought, what does that mean? And that basically means instead of having just 7 superpowered characters, now we've got 50-some-odd superpowered characters. Basically, any character in the DC universe is now automatically a member of the Justice League. But it allowed us to kind of dig deeper into the DC bench so that we could use characters like The Question and Hawk and Dove and Captain Atom, characters who are interesting to us as comic book fans, and they weren't necessarily household names as the other characters, but it was something that allowed us to kind of just expand the scope of the show. And it turned out to be quite a big hit with the fans. I always say it was my favorite show of all the shows I've ever worked on, because every episode was different than every other episode. And then doing the Justice League as a series of feature-length movies, it's interesting. It kind of gives us a little more of a narrow focus in terms of, instead of having season-long story arcs, we're basically telling movie-length stories with still pretty large ensemble cast. So it's tricky from a storytelling standpoint to make sure that each character is there for a reason. It's really tough to accommodate 7 lead characters. We always do try to balance it out. You want to make sure they at least get one really good action sequence in the film. It's a juggling act, it's a challenge.
How many of you are there? Not enough.
It's challenging to have all these amazing superheroes together on the screen to tell this big epic story with action and spectacle, but also a lot of character. And I think Zach does an amazing job balancing all of that out.
Wait until the camera comes around, Ben.
It is super exciting to finally bring all these superheroes, the Justice League, to the screen for the first time.
This is amazing. This is crazy.
The day we were all up on the wall for the first time, it was like watching my 8-year-old dreams come true. It took me back to those days watching the cartoons. I almost shed a tear. I will say I held it together pretty good. It's groundbreaking.
Wow, it's like a cave. Like a bat cave. I swear I've been blacking out and entering comic frames.
Harry.
And living in the world of this invented universe and then coming to, like, where am I? It's very hard to describe the feeling when you look out and you see that Alex Ross painting and you see it in front of you and it's these real people. It's so amazing.
He's back.
I had this moment the other day on set where I looked up and I saw Jason and Gal and Ben and Ezra and Ray there. And I thought, this is a piece of history happening right now, and I'm lucky enough to be a part of it.
Well, I knew you didn't bring me back because you like me.
I don't. Not.
It's interesting because pop culture has chewed up and spit out so many pop icons over the years. That's part of what pop culture does, is sort of consume characters and icons and ideas and start with them looking cool and interesting, and when it's done with them, they seem retro, and then they seem just absurd and goofy and hopelessly dated. And a lot of these core DC characters still don't seem dated. They somehow still work in stories today, and I think that's just the mark of characters that are very well drawn, that they still have this kind of resonance.
The fun and beauty of comic books is that when it's a shared universe, you're really standing on the shoulders of these creative giants before you, and everyone acknowledges and understands that their ideas will be used and changed and evolved to kind of further this giant storyline that we're all creating.
My man!
As comic book storytellers, we've been telling stories with these characters for over 50 years. So there's so many stories out there, so many great touch points for people to tap into and pull the ideas out and mold and create it to what works best for whatever medium, what works best for television, what works best for the screen. So I'm going to be interested where they take them.
We should always have new versions. We should always make the books relevant to the current generation. Keep the characters up to date. Don't let them become your granddaddy superhero. You need characters who reflect the modern age.
Slowpoke.
Oh, it's on.
I've been really blessed to be part of the evolution of the DC universe. You have these characters and you get to play with their motivations, and as long as you honor the canon, there's still a lot left that you can do, and that's a lot of fun.
Big round table. 6 chairs. Right there.
But room for more.
A room for more.